Oh, really?
Okay.
That's because you have to go.
Yeah, well,
To go.
it's a trial. Triple ply or one ply?
Take for a presentation.
Go Forrest.
I think double ply.
AA6DX.
All right, so we have a presentation.
Okay. Afterwards,
I was just showing you who he is. Mark Nelson, AA6DX. Let me introduce him. Well, we're going to have our guest speaker now. It's Mark Nelson, AA6DX.
And for those of you who don't know him, he's been around forever.
And a little bit longer.
How long?
He's right by the jail, so it's no problem finding him.
Well, I can't remember anything anymore. I got old somewhere along the way.
Oh.
And so I bought my compadre, Bob, WB6, quarts, pints, and gallons. Cape Plastic Ringo. And he is, as we speak, the ultimate DX in Humboldt. I mean, he does, works everything that walks or squeaks. And I still do, and he calls me and tells me they're on. I brought my laptop. Should have been smart enough to ring my hooker uppers and HDMI cord and all that. We can plug right into that. But people can play with this after we get through with the question and answer period here. And we are hooked up on the internet thanks to the fire department in the city of Eureka, and it's live. And we can go on and where we have the DX postings on the internet, where you can see what's on. And I suppose everybody here is at one time or another that's on HF has worked some DX. DX is in the eyes and ears of the beholder, and of course that can be on 2 meters working Ferndale could be DX. Yes. But generally speaking, you're talking about DX, you're talking about working in foreign countries. And to me, it was one of the most interesting parts of amateur radio of all there is. The beauty to me of amateur radio is that there is so much to do. I'm never bored with it. I know a lot of people have become hams, dropped out, came back, dropped out. I've never dropped out. I've got less active at times, but to me it's so fascinating. There's always something to do. I have the box that hooks up to you, and you hook up this to that, and the computer here, and the teletype there, and the, and I've done all this, and I've really enjoyed it throughout my life, and I still continue to. I've done teletype when we had the old machines like the Model 28 KSR, keyboard send and receive, and you go tunga tunga tunga. I love the smell of that. And they used to make this ozone smell of electricity wafting through your shack. And my wife hated it. But I really loved it, I did. And I had teletype and go in the middle of the night and sit in there and come back. It destroyed my regular typing because of the way you type with a teletype, rat-a-tat-tat. But I've done that. I love CW as far as, particularly in any sort of contest, I like CW real well. I'm fairly good at it. It's not a, I operate normally during a contest at 35 words per minute, maybe higher if the wind's pushing the right direction, But Bob and I learned Morse code together. I learned it first, and he was, we're talking about in 1964 when we got our licenses, and Bob was shortwave listening, and he heard me on there, and called me on the phone. We'd known each other since we were in the 3rd grade. We used to live on the same dairy farm, and those of you who remember John Dolson from the years past, he was just down around the corner from us out toward the mouth of the Mad River was his dairy ranch, and I knew him. I was just I was driving the milk truck and picking up the milk, but I was only 13 years old at the time, but we didn't tell the cops that. So Bob had been in the Air Force and became a shortwave listener. He was stationed out at Adak Island in Alaska, and he had a shortwave receiver, and he was logging Dewey's listening to and all that. Well, it so happened, I was working at Safeway at the time on Broadway, where the theater is now. And we were all motorcycle riding, and we used to kind of like to have a beer when we got hot up there in that mountain, motorcycle riding. We'd always run out. Somebody had to go get it. So to tell the person who went and got the beer where we were, we got these night kit walkie-talkies. That didn't work with the hoot, but we heard all these people on these walkie-talkies, and there was particularly one guy up on B Street. His name was Frank Clark. He was avid CBer, but he knew more about radio stuff than any hams I've ever met. He was 12Q0587 was his CB call. I remember that, and I can't remember his hand calls. But anyway, he used to have these big antennas, and there were all things for. He was a TV DXer. And he was showing me the thrills of watching like stations in Arizona or, you know, back east on his TV. And he'd fine tune the old black and white TV and get these things in. He had the boosters and he got me interested in this. And we went from that. I got into my novice license. We used to have a store up at Henderson Center on Grotto Street, and it was Knights, like Kurt Knight, and Curl was his wife, and they had the neatest electronics store, little bins like you take bread in, bread tins full of parts, just row after row, and you could go down there and buy and build anything out of that store. And he was given the local hams their licenses. At the time we had novice, which we no longer have. Incidentally, my wife is one. There are very, very few novice. They just let, I don't know what they're ever going to do with them. They just drifting out there. They didn't upgrade them like they did some of the others. Then you had your rest of your license. But here, in place of a general, you get a conditional if you were 250 miles, 225 miles, what it was from a San Francisco office, which we were, because it was in San Francisco was our closest one, to go take a test. So we would take it from somebody. It's very similar to what's going on today. So I had a conditional, as you did too, didn't you, Bob? Yes. And I had that for a long time until one day it was in San Francisco when I got my job. No particular reason, but then you could give tests if you had a general. You could give somebody else a test if you had your test. Well, I remember the first thing I worked as a novice. Remember, we were working with a receiver. It was about as broad as the barn when it received. It was you could hear half the band on your receiver. You know, with a cheapie. I never forget. I got an SX96. Somebody traded it in for a stereo setup. That was a hot thing at the time. The consoles at Montgomery Ward. I had a Montgomery Ward card. My wife was visiting her mom in New York, and somebody told me they've got this receiver down there, and they were more than happy to put that on my Montgomery Ward card. And I got my SX96, which I have with. But so I got to read it down, and I had to operate as a novice. We operated with a crystal. And I don't know how many people here ever operated a crystal set. You know? Yeah.
75 watts.
Yeah, we limited to 75 watts. Or so. And the crystal, we had the crystal for no BFO. Anyway, well, you can tell if a person that had a cheap transmitter with not a crystal, because they kind of saunter up and down the band. But anyway, so to change frequency, you had to plug another crystal in. So you could call CQ, da-da-da-da-da-da-da on your Morse key, and the guy answering you might be way up there. So you had to tune the band. Can you imagine that? You had to tune that whole portion of the novice portion of the band to find a guy answering you because he didn't have a crystal on your frequency. He'd get the one closest, you know. Duplex. And then to change frequency with the crystals, you would shave them literally to raise the frequency of the crystal, to raise it up the frequency and grind it up. But now, darn it, all your friends moved to a different frequency, you had to go down. Well, you took a graphite pencil, you took the crystal apart, and on the actual physical crystal itself, you take your pencil and put pencil on it until the frequency went down on that crystal. There was no turning the knob. Then you put it in, and oh, not quite far enough. You did it again, and so forth. So it was kind of fun. But anyway, my first experience with DX that started me off with that, down that trail, was I worked Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. And I can't remember things going on yesterday, but I can remember that. I was up there working Lethbridge, and I got out the mountain, looked up, and it was way far away up there. And that was really a thrill. It was on 40 meters. Not too long after that, I worked ADAC, Alaska, and I was so excited. I was 3 feet off the ground for 2 or 3 days, because I remembered Bob being stationed there a few years before that. Anyway, so in the meantime, we got together. Bob started studying his code. We studied the code together, get on the air and practice back and forth. I got my license, and then in those days you could tell when somebody, how long they've had their license because of the call. And it was alphabetically given, you know, so I was NHF and he was QPG. Folks remember Jim Myers, which, you know, W6I's cold beer, silent key friend, but his actual call was WB6DGJ. So you could tell how long somebody had the license. He was D, and I was N, Bob was Q, so you could tell what sequence they're doing. By the way, we used to call him Dippy Goofy Jim. He did. Bob got his license, and he was quarts, pints, and gallons. I was a nice, happy fellow for many years, and we used to, and when I got to DXing, my wife would come in whenever the 15 meters would open to Japan, because I said, it's WB6, nice, happy fellow, and she would just stand there and laugh, because they'd say, WB6, nice, happy fellow. They would just come out so funny. It was one of the few times I could ever get my wife to really pay attention to DXing, and she did. Then I got bit by the contest bug, which is another interesting facet of a lot of people who are DXers are contesters, and a lot of contesters are DXers, but they are two different animals. They really, it's not the same at all. I currently belong to Northern California Contest Club, which is got like 180 members, I think, right now. Don't hold me to that, like that. And but it's primarily Bay Area oriented, but it will. The people go to these meetings and they practice and they study and they have practice tests, and when they contest, they're in it. Well, I mean, that's what they do. It's similar to somebody playing golf when they're serious about it. You know, that's Sunday afternoon, you know, and it's the Kiwanis Club or something's holding their thing. They're serious about it, and these guys are. So I got to go to some of that and get involved in that, and I got learning more and more how to DX. Meantime, Bob was starting down that road too, bit him. And so what struck me, I remember I went to a DX club luncheon that they had. It was just before the contest season, which is generally in the fall, and we had sweepstakes and the different contests. And this old fella, which I thought was old at the time, I think he's a little younger than what I am now, but anyway, he would go to his ear doctor before the contest season to get his ears cleaned out so he could hear the contest better. Now that's pretty good. So that was the way that happened. And I got into that, and they actually, I had a pretty fair station set up in Arcata Bottom. And they moved the center of the club because you have to have it in this circle for score to count for a RRL contest to be a club station. And we were competition with, we had the Yankee Clipper Contest Club was on the East Coast, and there was the different contest clubs throughout the United States. And they were all these guys saying, you know, they're serious contesters and study of antennas and propagation and radio and electronics, you know, the whole thing. And I really picked up a lot from that, because here we were kind of, we didn't have any, there wasn't too many people interested in all that. We started a club because everybody was like NCCC, so we started one here, and it's called the Redwood Country Contest Club. And I think we had 18 members. Dave, you weren't in it? I don't know, is anybody here in that club? NCCC, RCCC?
What was the name of the club?
Everybody's gone away.
What was the name of the club?
Redwood Country Contest Club.
Redwood Country Club.
And we had, we'd operate from our own stations, and well, I usually had a multiple operators station set up going at my house, and my wife would make the sandwich. She's been known ever since as a sandwich lady. When we contest up in Alaska, she'd make over 100 sandwiches for the contest there. We'd have like 8 operators on, around all the time, and she'd make them at egg and devil ham and on and on and on, all these different sandwiches, label them on, and that way we didn't have to leave the shack to eat, see? Well, anyway, so we did that. We've been active on field days, and active sweepstakes, and all these different contests in CW, a lot of CW, and I still love the CW and operate just about any CW contest, more so than the phone ones. My fingers work longer than my voice is these days. Bob is an excellent CW operator. What's your speed, Bob? 45?
Oh, I talk at 25, and I can, work. I can listen at 35 and 40.
So it's hard to get to learn it, but once you've learned it,
Yeah.
for life, and it's fun to be able to
One
do.
thing about CW, you don't realize that you're operating that fast. I'll listen to W1AW, and I'll go in there, and I'm copying 20 words a minute, and I'm thinking it's 15 or something. Because you get used to, you just get used to it. You get used to the speed.
It's very similar to typing. People pick up speed in typing, and as they go along, and you never really forget it. You might not be able. I can't pick up and go 45 words a minute at the top of a hat, but drop that hat about 3 times, and I'm with you. We enjoy doing that. And contests, especially in contests where there's a sequence that's followed, and but it's so funny. If you listen to TV and something coming on Morse code, it'll go about the 3rd letter. You're tuned in and you're hearing it. My problem with that, though, to be honest about it, is after you contest for 30 hours out of 48 or something like that, the whole week long I'm hearing CW. Everything goes cling, 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 or cling. I'm listening for that call sign to be in there. Well, anyway, we just wanted to kind of go over some of the stuff that we do with this, and DXing and so forth. What did I do with that paper? I guess it's still a set. But we've, it used to be fun to see all your results in the, thank you, in the magazines, but they kind of quit doing that. Electronics, they kind of ruined that. Now they put just maybe the major winners, but I argued with them, I said, how am I going to show my great-grandkids where Grandpa was in that contest? And it was one of the thrills of it was being able to be in the magazine and get your call sign. I mean, we're all proud of our call signs. It's part of the game. But I don't do that anymore. You got to get it off the internet. Of course, I guess there won't be any magazines for too long, the way things are going. World Radio now is what, just that magazine's just on the internet. But the fellow who started that's now Silent Key, but he was a friend of mine, and we used to go to a lot of conventions. I was go to the convention, both DX and ARL, and I was ARL section. What is that called? Colonel? Section
Manager.
Yeah, it's SM now. Then it was Section Communication Manager, SCM. Now they adopted just the SMF. And so we go around to the different clubs and so forth. And that's it. Went to lots of conventions, and we used to have lots of fun of those. They served cold beer, and it was fun. But we used to have a lot of fun. And Armand Noble was his name. And he started out World Radio. And he was in Sacramento, so I got to see him pretty often. Talking about the Colonel, I think you've heard that story, is that I heard somebody one afternoon, I worked at Safeway, and I worked odd hours, because at Safeway you didn't necessarily work 8 to 5. I heard somebody in the afternoon, Eureka, California, it's W6GGR. I'm in Eureka. Yeah, this is WB6NHF. WB6, nice happy fellow.
Yeah.
And Golden Gate Radio came back to me. And he was looking to run a phone patch. And that's the first time I'd heard the Colonel, or he had heard me.
YS1THM.
Yeah. That was this, YS1 was the prefix for El Salvador. And we got to become friends on the air, and I used to, we had like weekly schedule, and if I wasn't at work and he was available from his duties, we'd run phone patches. Didn't have cell phones those days, and it was, a phone patch was a much welcome thing for the service people, correct? And we'd call his father and family, father who was also Colonel Tom Monroe.
Yeah.
And we would run phone patches, which was another thing of the hobby that kind of went along with the DXing, because a lot of the places that were DX were also isolated from telephone service, or it was so expensive as prohibitive. For example, I used to work KH6SP, KH6 Salty Peanuts. It was at the sub base in Hawaii. I'd run phone patches out of there by the hour in the evenings, and for the servicemen. And that led to one thing we do that for Bob too. Hours and hours and hours of running phone patches, because there wasn't the telephone service, and our servicemen, what there was, our servicemen couldn't very well afford it, so that we'd be calling their wives and family. You did that for a long time in South America too, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody remember Jonestown? That I ran patches for that place. Of course, we had no idea what was going on down there. There was just a church group down there, and we just thought we'd run phone patches for them. And when now that tragedy of them went down, I was contacted to ask if I knew anything about any. I'm like, well, no. They gave me a number, and we'd call it. Somebody in San Francisco usually. And then I got an award. I wished I knew where it went, or where it is. It's from USS Kitty Hawk for running phone patches, and because I'd run and we would, well, that way that worked. If anybody's interested, we contact somebody on Guam, and they would have a group of people who wanted phone patches, and these people would be not necessarily in the radio room, and they'd have a list of whom they wish to speak, and we here would call the operator and ask for a Marine operator, because they knew what we were doing and understood how it worked. And we would get a hold. They would say, okay, this call's going for Jerry Smith, and it's going to go to his mother, Eileen Smith, and this is her phone number, and give us the phone number. And so then we tell the Marine operator, who in turn would connect with them, or however they did it with a telephone company, sometimes with another operator, and they would collect from Eureka, would be the collect call, not from Guam. And that was a piddling by comparison. And then the people would come on, and they'd carry, they use over. Sometimes we didn't have to, but generally you'd say over. And we'd go back and forth until they got through with, and then they'll say, I love you, and da-da-da, and hang up, say the next one, and we'd have a list we had taken. And say, okay, now the next one's for Fred McGuire. Well, then they'd call his sweetheart or whomever, and the beat would go on. We might run 15 or 20 of these, of course, one of my funniest stories, I'm always going to put it in Reader's Digest, though, is when we went through one of these whole things. The band wasn't in the best condition, passable, but somebody not a radio operator was sort of noisy. And so we went through the whole rigmarole. They got through. It was to his loved one, wife, and they got through, and he said, well, honey, I sure miss you. I miss you too. I love you, and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, well, you sure you do this, and da-da-da, and they got all through and hung up. Okay, and the operator says, okay, let's see now, what do we got next? Now we got this. Well, she gave me the name of the next one. So we started, I said, well, wait a minute, that's the one we just ran. No, that was for so-and-so. I said, no. I said, give me the number. I said, no, that's So these people had gone through a whole conversation in 5 to 10 minutes. I can't remember exactly how long that was. 10-minute conversation, loving each other, kissing each other. And when we got on through, they kissed each other goodbye. And she had asked him if he got the money. She said no. He said, well, did you get the check I sent you? She said, well, no. You know, and then they loved each other and they signed up. Now what do you do? So we called the lady back, and the operator and I explained what happened, and she said, oh, I'm so relieved. She wasn't mad at all. Because she said, what happened to all that money? Sending to each other. Well, I'll never forget that. That was embarrassing, to say the least, too. I just say, okay, so then you go for that, you get like a lot of contacts with foreign stations doing that you normally wouldn't. You get, because they were out there, and a lot of times the people on that end weren't normally like DXers, meaning the station didn't go around looking for people to work like an expedition might. So you would have, they were DX and they would send you a card, but you were trying to get all the countries to get an award. This is the first of the awards, and this one has character. It's been, it's moved with me multiple times, been in broken glass and so forth, but this is the prime award for DXers. This is the DXCC, DX Century Club. And then you got it, meant you've worked and confirmed 100 different countries. Well, then as you get more countries, you send in the cards to have them analyzed to make sure it's verified. Then you get these stickers. And every 10, you get another sticker. So you'd have these stickers all the way around. These are actually just like a stamp that's put on there. This one is original date, October 13th, 1967 is when I had. Well, I could fill this up, and Bob, how many countries you got, Bob?
321 confirmed.
321 countries he's working. He's had, the last time I knew how many I had that I was paying attention was 307. I think it was at 317 was my estimated. He's ahead of me, but I got a lot of mine through contesting, and yeah. Let's see here, some of those things.
Take a pic.
I will. Oh, by the way, here's the contest awards. This is just an example. This is for the California Cusa Party, where all the world tries to work in California. And that's one of my favorite contests I have. At one time I held the record for Humboldt. I've held W6JTI is our main competition down there, Whitethorn. And but I still hold a record for Tehama County, that contest. It's a 30-hour contest, and you operate 24 of them, and like 1,670 contacts in that time I made. I was younger. but they used to pay like 12 to 1,500 each contest that's on. I figured in the course of a year, between the contests I was serious on and the ones that I messed around in, about 20,000 QSOs a year. So, you know, that's both phone and CW. But you get these awards, it's for the glory. You know, no money involved. Although they give out a nice bottle of wine in some of the awards. And I belong, sponsored by the Northern California Contest Club, to which I belong. It's actually close to being one of the founders of it. Then you get the job of setting out the QSL cards. All those contacts, there's a good percentage of them on a QSL card. And not so much anymore because we have eQSL and QSL over the internet and so forth. QSL is called the complement of a QSO, or how does that go? Something like that. Anyway, and so these are various QSL cards of my own that I got. This one was, I had a gold, I used those gold pens that wrote gold on these, so they'd stand out from the run-of-the-mill QSL cards. thousands of, this was made up over in Red Bluff. Then we had this, this is my contest station I had in Reading. It was a, hot dog station, big antennas, big amps, and a couple radios sitting there. And matter of fact, that particular picture, the background on this is used in the ARRL handbook from 1981 as a way to set up a ham station, and a description of how I had it set up. With, and I had foot switch and this and all that. It was fancy. Then you wanted something. This was when I was a nice, happy fellow. You got these fancy cards again. Just yeah. Blue 86. And then we had this contest club. They always go around whenever you heard one of your fellow members, they'd say, KB. This way, instead of saying 73 or goodbye or see you Sam or something, you always say KB, which meant kick butt. And so this was my card with Snoopy the dog doing a kick butt. And I used to print cards out with that had the basic information. This was from my Shasta County station, which we had over there in right at the 80s there. This was like for the C2 Worldwide contest, and we had 1,800 contacts for that. And this was just my standard QSL card. And then I have some DX cards. Bob has a bunch of them. I'm going to let him talk. I'm running out. And then I had, when I moved back to Virginia, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, and I'd get on 160 meters, and I had a real nice antenna. I had to have some big trees, and had a regular flat top on there and run a 4572B amplifier on 160 meters. And it was just every time I got over there, it was just like sounded like a swarm of bees coming back to you and picking them. So I had to have a lot of QSL cards because every one of them were my QSL cards. Well, they started to hear the 6, and they thought I was in California at first, and then they tuned in. Well, when they tuned in, they might as well call me when they found out I was in Virginia. This was what this red and black one here, this is what the ARL staff members sent out. And I had a host somewhere, I've got a slug of these, but this is what you get if there's somebody from the ARRL who is, this one's, he's the vice president of ARRL. Here's one that's filled out. It's ready to be sent out. This is from when I was in Alaska, Fairbanks, and actually North Pole is my mailing address. I got all kinds of hands would send me QSL cards and ask them to please send me one back from North Pole because they're giving it to their kids or cards to their kids for Christmas. But this was written out. And the call sign was ONL07837. Well, that's a funny call. It's a shortwave listener call, and you get lots of those. We used to get hundreds of these from Russia in the days of when from shortwave listeners, because they had to have so many shortwave listener verified. Well, you wouldn't call it QSL, it wasn't a two-way, but verified that they had heard.
Shortwave listener report.
Yes, they had to be verified, and for them to get a ham license, so they could print. And so you had a big signal into Russia, you could expect it. And so forth. This was my Red Bluff radio card, and so forth. Bob has some too. And as far as the DX cards, you would send off to the Bureau, and it's known in CW as Buro, B-U-R-O. And you would send them this with your call up there. They put that stamp up. But you send it to yourself, self-addressed stamped envelope, and they'd send these back full of cards. I just brought this here with me. Look, this is just where you get maybe 10 or 20 cards. You just get boxes of them like that box there. Just, and I'd send them. This you would send, and they'd send them as it came. But if they didn't, the person who handled your letter of the alphabet didn't go to work for a month or two, you get a big box like that. So for that, I'd just send them money, which they would hold, or postage, one of the two. And you could just send them postage down to the Bureau. Everybody in the world sends their card to the bureau where they sort them. And then they go into, then it's further sorted down to your call. And so away it goes to you on your nickel from there. And I really take my hat off to the people who do that, because some of those are hard to read. And we used to, Japan, I don't know if there's so much though, somewhat from what everybody tells me, but we used to, every time you worked Japan, you could just bet a nickel and you were gonna get a card. Yeah. And if you were in a contest, you worked them on 5 bands, you got 5 cards. And you had to answer all those cards, supposedly. You just get I would get a box of cards, and 3/4 of them would be Japan. Bob, go someplace with this. Tell them about the expedition. Yes.
Mark, can you talk about Christmas Island? You told me that you went there.
Yes, sure did.
How'd that go? Where is it at?
Go to Hawaii and turn left. There you go.
I thought it'd be near North Pole.
There too. That was, wanted to go on the expedition, and we wanted something, we didn't want to go to Outer Mongolia or something. We wanted something, you know, relatively close. There was an operator who lived there, and he was fairly active on that, but for a contest, we wanted to go there. And Ted Collins, he was from McKinneyville, became a ham. I first worked in, well, I was on 20, and he was on 40, but he was on 20. He had loaded his amplifiers, transmitted a little heavy, and he sort of was on all of them. I kept tuning in the signal, and I answered him, and I would never come back. I said, well, that station, and finally, he worked somebody, and I heard him say McKinneyville. I says, he's got to hear me. I was in Arcata Bottoms, you know. Well, I wasn't, he was on 40, and it was going on 20. His signal was on, I tuned down to 40, and there he was. So we met, and he became quite the hand. He worked, when I had my electronics stores, he worked for me, and before he could even drive, I was supposed to drive him to work. And anyway, we did contests. He was in with our contest bunch and doing things with the field days and all that. And it was, he and I went out there to Christmas Island, and we loaded up all our stuff, and we got out there and set up our antennas. We put up loops and things at the Captain Cook Hotel, which is like, well, you know, you've heard Motel 6, well, this is like a Motel 3. And it was beer was cheaper there than it was in Hawaii. Anyway, so we set up and we operated for CQ worldwide over Thanksgiving. And for Thanksgiving dinner, we had fried tuna and evaporated milk. That was interesting.
What year
we
was
were
that?
there for 10 days, and we had a good time.
What year was that?
That would have been 1983.
How big is the island? What's it populated?
Well, there is no native population there because there's no real water. They have to catch water. Although there's people who live there, they're actually not. There's no such thing as a Christmas Islander. There's people who live there though because they do catch rain or whatever, and they have plantations there for coconuts, and they make copra. And we got to travel out, and I got to stand at ground zero from an atomic bomb blast, right where it went off. That was sort of thrilling. And Brits were there during during the 50s, you know, when they were doing all that atomic bomb. So, you know, and they had there were some of the buildings were still standing there, metal, and they have these great big I-beams and whatnot, you know, holding up like a hanger. But you could go up to that and you go, and then you put your finger right through that beam because they were so rusty. There weren't any cars out there, but they had pickups, and the pickups were all Japanese Toyotas and Datsuns there at the time. Yeah, Datsuns. And they were all just, unless it was just a year or two old, they were just rusted junk. You know. But they ran fine, didn't hurt the motor. The bodies were something to behold. And they were super friendly to us. We had a great time. Ted was quite a technician, more so than I, but between us, they had some radios that they used CB radios there for communication, because it was cheap communication for them. And they had radios that didn't work, like at the hotel. The hotel manager had a big set of Tram or something, one of the real expensive CB sets. And it didn't work. I do not remember. And then they had problems with antennas. They didn't know about semiconductors and all that. But anyway, Ted fixed that radio for him, and boy, we could do no wrong. We got half of our beers were paid for. But one young fella, he wouldn't come home with us so bad. He couldn't come home with us. And every time we go to our room here, he'd be. But we did a lot of operating, and people couldn't understand why we'd go out there. They're all going fishing. A lot of Japanese there. That's one of their vacation spots. And they'd all go out to, I say a lot, 20. And they'd go out, they were out fishing and on the reefs and whatnot, that was the big deal there. They couldn't understand why we'd want to come stay in a room or be out, under the mosquito netting, talk to somebody on the radio out there. And they couldn't understand that. But we had a good time. And it wasn't too terribly expensive at that time.
Did you bring your own antennas and whatnot?
Yeah. We brought everything. Only thing we got there was electricity, but we were, at the time, we were using little Icom 730s. We each had one. We normally had the same kind of radios, that was our portable radios for whatever, and they were great. Actually, we had one stacked right on top of the other, and we were working two different bands in the room there. But we made, primary antenna was loop, because they're broad banded, the contrast was CW, and we pruned everything for that, but like, for example, a 20-meter loop will work just fine on 10-meter stem. And so, it's the easiest things to put up. We had brought our own poles, stick up. There wasn't really anything out there you could go get. I mean, there was nothing there. There was no Walmart. But that was good. And we went down to Belize. That was a different story. There was 10 of us went down there. Some of us knew each other from before, but most of us had never met. We all met in Houston and went down to Belize and we were there over Halloween, which was their Day of the Dead, when all the kids wore costumes and all that. It was really quite interesting. But we were on Ambergris Cay, and we set up for the contest, and then we operated and we made the whole thing. We made like 10,000 contacts, including the contest, and just on the air. We had a big long receiving antenna for 106. It went way down there, and we could hear, went over the water and through the water and over the woods. And then we had verticals out in the water. So it was a couple days later, and one of the maids there could kind of speak English. She said, "You go out there?" Yeah, this is our verticals. We had those one Dentron came out with 3 antennas, and you could steer them on 40-meter vertical, and then boxes and all that for it. And Dentron had supplied them to us. And so she says, no, go there. And through a lot of trials and tribulations, we figured out what she's talking about. There's men eating fish in there. And they were swimming around our legs, and we didn't know what they were. And that was a little different. One guy was brave enough to get those antennas out there. They worked real well, but here we are out there doing those fish that eat you. I forget what they were. But they're like a piranha, but I don't think that wasn't their name, but they were. No, bad plan. So, but they worked real well. They were there then.
Yeah. Mark, I know one of your most memorable contacts was your first one. What was the rarest country that you ever worked?
Well, it depends when, as things became less. My rarest I ever worked was China. When it first came on the air, I was down there right after. I wasn't the first, but I was. At the time, I was in Alaska, and of course, you're closer, so you had an advantage. I had a 5-element monobander with a 46-foot boom on 20 meters, and I was an SB 220 amp that was hot rodded, and they did do pretty well with that. And I got in that, boy, there's a zillion people in there for that, because the reason being, China was not allowed to communicate with the outside world, particularly by amateur radio in those days. And finally got permission, and some guys, Marty Lane and OH2BH is one of the greatest DXers of all time, IBM executive, and goes all over the world, and he from Finland, and he travels around, and he's been in all these, but he was there and helped them set up, and he was there, of course, for other reasons. It's just so funny how he dinkies that into ham radio all the time, all over the world, but he's quite a guy. He was supposed to come spend time with us in Arcata one time. He was going to come to the club, and then he ended up, they took him out to dinner and to San Francisco, and they got all, and so he was going up, we went up to the Seattle ARRL convention, and that was a U.S. convention up there. And I was going up, so he was going to stop by and visit with us. We were all ready for him, and he ended up having to rent a car and went up I-5 because they got behind. But we were going up there. Went up there. Every once in a while I'd get invited to give a presentation. This was when I was younger and smarter. To go give a presentation at a convention or whatever about whatever what the subject may be, and usually about how to contest or how to DX or something. So we're talking, Bob and I were talking about field day. The club here does an excellent job on that these years. Some years wasn't so good, but we had several good ones. We went and one time we had my 15-meter beam, 5 elements. The 5 elements at 38 feet is called the Big John. And this thing, you needed a hydraulic jack to put it up. And I still have that, by golly, it's down at Fort Bragg. Talking about something.
Get it off your toes.
And we put that up, people were giving us heck, the Humboldt Amateur Radio Club, for running too much. You're not supposed to run amplifiers, not in the Spirit field day. We were on the tower, we had the antenna. And we had the antenna on the edge of a ridge, and it was up at 40 feet.